It's a fireside chat with Mr. Javed Ashraf, a career diplomat who joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1991. Mr. Ashraf was appointed as the Ambassador of India to the Republic of France in 2020 and was previously the High Commissioner of India to Singapore. Mr. Ashraf would be joining us virtually from Paris, and he would be talking about the emerging geopolitical scenario and its impact on the global trade and investments. He would also discuss its implications on sectors such as technology, energy, manufacturing, and also on new emerging opportunities in India. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule and joining us for our event. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Ashish would be conducting this fiery chat. So, Ashish, over to you.
Thank you, Mansi, and it's a great pleasure to have you here, sir.
Good to see you too, and congratulations on this day of Thunder of Dragons. Very nice to see you here after a long time.
So, just to set the context, I think the reason why we wanted to listen to you, and I've had the personal fortune of working closely with you and your initiatives in building the India-Singapore entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, geopolitics has become suddenly a disruptor for entrepreneurship, giving more opportunities. So, wanted to hear your thoughts on what's happening on the geopolitics and how it is changing how trade and investments will flow.
Well, thank you, Ashish. First of all, of course, I must say it feels a bit strange speaking from Paris to Mumbai, despite the same backdrop. But also, it might feel a bit distant being a diplomat speaking to a crowd of investors, tech experts, entrepreneurs. But I think no time in recent memory has the convergence been greater, or the impact of geopolitics on economic choices been stronger than it is today. One, of course, is that we are in the course of the past 3 years witnessing two black swan events that none had anticipated, or actually not to this extent. One, of course, was the pandemic, which was a great disruptor, but it also had very strong geopolitical consequences. The second, of course, is the Ukraine war, which nobody knows which direction it will take, how long it will last, and what will be the eventual outcome. But really, in one sense, these are events that are building on much deeper, longer-term global shifts that are taking place and which are evident to everyone. And in many ways, as we all know, crises tend to accelerate or accentuate the trends and telescope the future into the present. So we are seeing a emergence of great power competition of the kind that we thought was behind us. The China-US rivalry is going to get even sharper in the days ahead. It is also now with Russia now an implacable foe to the West. So there is now a two binaries, and there is a great fear that there might also be a much deeper sense of Russia-China collusion, though China has been playing its cards well at the moment, cooperating when it needs to, and taking an independent and neutral stand when it must. But I think instead, we tend to think of the world in 20th century paradigms, which is that either it's going to be a unipolar world or a multipolar world, a bipolar world centered around China-US rivalry. But I think it is going to be far more diffuse. There's going to be a much more multipolar with the rise of other major powers. Europe has a desire for and to be an independent sport, a sort of a sovereign entity globally, EU in particular, but it faces a range of both internal and external challenges. There's of course going to be India, unquestionably regarded as emerging as a major pole in the world. There will be Japan will still be there, where you will see countries in Africa, Indonesia, with Brazil, Mexico. There'll be those countries that will also have exercise influences in their region and in some ways also in the international order. But what's important really is that the international order and the international system that we are familiar with is behind us. We're not sure where it is going to go from here. But in this period of flux and transition, and I want to come into specific this audience, for the first time since the end of the Cold War, geopolitics is has a strong influence on economic choices that countries and companies will have to make. Sanctions are going to become a great disruptor in terms of existing networks and relationships. There will be a strong influence of geopolitics on trade and investment flows. Now, we've already seen trade disputes emerge, trade denials emerge, but now there is a possibility that the US might also introduce restrictions, even prohibitions on FDI flows into China. You've already seen this impact of sanctions on Russia. But what is very interesting is that doesn't mean that major powers are able to assert or impose their will. You can see even in the Ukraine crisis, while there is a unanimity of view on the principles, but there is hardly any unanimity. In fact, great divergences on the choices that countries are making, despite the great power pressures from the West. So the other analysis of going to be the most perhaps important area is going to be, once again, great competition around technology. And technology, as it has always been in the last 200-300 years, an instrument of political, economic, and military power. And therefore, you would see a lot of geopolitical competition being centered around technology and its users across a very wide range of areas. So we are entering a very diffuse, a very nebulous world with no certainty about where it is going, and also at the same time multiple global challenges that affect us all, whether it is climate change or whether it is pandemics, which will be more frequent now, or food crisis, which is going to be a serious issue, not just because of Ukraine, but in a more structural and long-term extent. The technology will be at the heart. One, of course, I want to speak a little bit about the digital technology, and you and I have worked quite a bit on that as an instrument of our diplomacy. One, of course, is that we've seen, if you look at, we are supposedly in the fourth industrial revolution, but if you see the first, accumulated power for UK, the second one at the turn of the 19th century led to a great deal of competition in Europe and the emergence of the United States and Japan. The third actually accumulated power in the hands of the US because of the mastery of technology, but it also enabled free flow of data, information, technology, finance to countries like China, and enabled in many ways their rise up also. Now we are really at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, and you're seeing it play itself out in many ways, and I'll come to where it also means, what it means for India. One, of course, is that digital technology and data both will be sources of sovereignty, of national security, of economic competitiveness, leadership, and international power. I mean, this is absolutely no question around that. The second is that it will also be very important in the context of addressing global challenges. And when we address those global challenges, it isn't just an altruistic exercise in meeting clean energy needs or addressing climate change or recycling or preserving biodiversity, addressing pandemic. It will become again an instrument of political and global influence. We are, of course, when we look at data, for example, so we also see when it comes to technology, there is going to be an increasing decoupling between the United States and China. And the technology denial regimes will also force a number of countries to make choices, companies to make choices. I know a lot of companies are, for example, talking to us about relocating or diversifying supply chains in India, principally by the fear of what they could trip on with the United States or the West. There will be a competition for standards without question, and it will play itself out both in terms of market influence, but also in the capture of international institutions that set standards. So it will partly be at the level of markets to the ground, but partly in terms of capital. of the institutions at global level. And third, of course, will be a question of more and more countries are investing heavily in new technologies, whether it is in chips or all the way down into building digital commons for themselves. I can tell you, you've seen that in the US. In Europe, it has become an obsession, really. In France, it is a principal objective. And you'll see this is so one is the denial part, the second will be investing in creating more innovative environment at home. Now, the third part of this is going to be, as I said, standards, and the fourth is going to be data. Now, we've seen data has been flowing freely across the borders, but over the past few years, whether it is us or whether other countries, they're beginning to realize the economic value, the value in terms of power, sovereignty, besides privacy and individual rights, etc. And more, you can't stop data, of course, but there will be efforts to exercise sovereignty over data. Now that is already happening in India, that's happening in Europe. And also it's going to be not just between countries, but it is also going to be about who owns it. And whether we look at ourselves or at Europe, there is also the other dimension, not just as a level of geopolitics, but also between whether big tech should continue to have that kind of power, or whether we are able to create actually a future in which we have open, free, accessible, democratic, inclusive internet and digital networks around the world, where data is not principally owned or held, manipulated, used, exploited, whichever way you call it, by the big tech, or held entirely by state control. So there is that space in between. And I say that for India, this is a moment of great opportunities for the following reasons. One is that, we've always been a country in terms of political choices, a country that have acted in terms of both principles and interests, but we've always been consistent and transparent and acted with a sense of trust. So there is, despite what you see in the current environment, we've managed to maintain the independence of choices in terms of the relationships that we have. But it's also clear to all our partners that we don't take sides in helping one dominate or win over the other. We make very, very clear choices on that. And it isn't just between US, China, or Russia. It has also been, for example, in Southeast Asia or the Middle East countries, where we've been great partners with others, with a lot of adversaries among themselves. So that's one very important. And when we come to geopolitics and technology and economics, this is going to be a great factor. Supply chain resilience, the concentration risks that we saw during the pandemic, all those are factors which I constantly hear from companies here in Europe and France, whether they are in technology or in other domains, about the need for diversifying into India. So trust has been a very important factor there. But there's also something else, and which is what we have achieved today in terms of digitalization and digital revolution. And this is now almost universally accepted, particularly with regards to public digital infrastructure. And I must say also the innovation that we are making in terms of DEPA, for example, data empowerment and architecture, where I can tell you that here in France, when we talk to people in President's office or in the larger ecosystem, they recognize that we have achieved high standards of protection of data, but have also created technological solutions and institutional architecture that enable us to both protect data and use it for empowering people, for providing public services efficiently, for making our societies and our economies more inclusive, and reaching all kinds of benefits to the people in the most efficient manner. And this is something, whether we talk education or whether we talk of health or banking or pension or insurance or a whole range of public services, these are things that are now widely recognized. So I think when we look at the geopolitics, our relationship with the rest of the world, the trust we command, the digitalization that we have achieved, the innovation that is there in our country, and the scale and the speed with which we are moving all place us extremely well when companies or countries have to make now choices in an increasingly fragmented or fragmenting world. So, and it's going to be particularly important that we play a leading role in setting global standards and protocols in a number of areas. And the other area that's going to be a source of great competition will be telecommunications. And I think we're doing well in positioning ourselves both in 5G and in the future in the 6G space as well.
Great. No, thanks for that. That's really insightful. I have one question for you, in the context of many of the startups who decide to go international or who wish to tap capital globally. Do you have any advice on what to avoid or what new pockets of capital or markets are emerging, which might be more friendly to Indian startups and Indian startup ecosystem in the future?
Well, of course, is as you are aware, we did a lot of work in Singapore and here in France. Since I've come in the past 2 years, we have been trying to create a platform that enables our startups to enter the European market or to tap capital or to collaborate to further strengthen their capacities. We had a nice virtual platform called Infinity, India France Innovation and Information Technologies. We had 450 Indian startups participate in that. And we had 16 panel sessions. We have also worked together in which Mr. Nandan Nilekani and I inaugurated earlier this year infrastructure, which was really about collaboration in public digital infrastructure and public digital goods. And we were the country of the year at IvyCap, which is the first time they designated a country as country of the year. And this is Europe's largest fair. We had 66 Indian startups participate in that. Great experience for them as well. Now, I think a few things I wanted to emphasize. One is that I've always laid stress on the fact that we shouldn't just speak or focus on platforms or apps, which is a natural advantage for us, but also invest in meeting some of the most perennial global challenges. Because in many of these, we now need to embed knowledge, data, and technology. I mean, many of these are AI-driven. So I'd say that when we look at the challenges of recycling, of climate change, health, of education, of payments, of financial inclusion, of reaching, and there are so many of these areas where, or e-mobility, where we think there are great opportunities for us and for our startups to make a huge impact globally. Likewise, there is a recognition that India offers that kind of a scale where if you have a good product and a good solution, companies would be interested. So our objective is both to guide startups, but also continue to create platforms where they can get opportunities internationally, but also be able to tap capital. And I can tell you a few examples. During IvyCap, we saw, first of all, a signing of an MOU on RuPay and UBI acceptance in France. We hope to start with Eiffel Tower to begin with. We have also seen a distributor here accepted e-scooter from India as part of the ride-sharing platform, which should get launched soon. There were a number of very interesting queries, including from LVMH and L'Oreal, on some of the recycling startups that were there because they want to now be ethical in that area. We had some outstanding health products, I mean, small devices, affordable food. But there is a huge market out there in Africa, in Latin America, and Asia of the unbanked, the uninsured, the unincluded people who still are in a crash-driven economy. So you'll see a vast opportunities, And we shouldn't just focus now at the moment on our domestic market, despite the fact that we have great scale, but on the not just in valuation, but also in solving burning problems and creating value not just in India, but also abroad. It doesn't have to be the same solution, but it's the same ideas, the same basic building blocks that we can employ. Because we have this window of opportunity in which we can become global leaders. And this is the beginning of a new journey. And I saw products even providing some excellent solutions for energy efficiency with here. So for now, there is just a very vast opportunity. My advice would be focus on products, not just platforms and app. Focus on value creation, not on valuation, and be aggressive in going internationally. Because today there is great recognition of what Indian startup ecosystem can achieve and what we have done in terms of digitalization and creation of public digital services.
Thank you, sir, for painting the picture for us so clearly and for breaking it down. And thank you for taking time to be part of IvyCap Day.